Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of American Pizza Books. So for this video, I thought I'd do another book collection video. I've done a few of those on this channel so far. I've done book collection videos on my Stephen King collection and my Dean Koontz collection. And I'm sure I'll probably do updated collection videos of those authors when I get the chance. But today I'm going to do a book collection video on an author that I haven't really seen a whole lot of here on YouTube. I think there have been some people who have done book reviews on some of his books. But in the way of book collection videos, I don't think I've really seen very many for him, if not any. So I decided to do that. So the author I'm going to be focusing on is Robert McCammon. And I'd say he's a fairly well-known author. I mean, he's probably not as well-known as like a Stephen King or a Dean Koontz, but I mean, he's pretty well-known. I mean, some of his books have won the Bram Stoker Award for Best Novel. Some of his books have been on the New York Times best-selling list, so I mean, I'd say he's fairly up there. He's kind of similar to Stephen King in that early on in his career he wrote mostly horror, in the horror genre, but as he went on he kind of branched out a little bit, and for a long stretch of time, I believe he had either retired from writing for a little while or wasn't writing at all. So yeah, but I mean he's got a fair amount of books in his name. Obviously not as many as like King or Koontz. I mean, because those guys, I mean, they have a fuck ton of books. But I mean, McCammon has a fair amount of books under his name. So I'm just going to go through them, and I believe these are actually in order of publish date. So yeah. And the thing about Robert McCammon is that some of his books are really kind of a lot of his books actually are kind of hard to find. Like you won't find them in Barnes and Noble because of something that happened. Something I won't go into detail about it, but for one reason or another, Barnes & Noble and places like that don't carry his books. Like, you might find some of his books in, like, a half-price books or another store that's called Books on Sale. But a lot of these I got offline, so that's kind of how you have to get his books, or at least a lot of his books. Now, my collection is not complete. I don't have several of his books. I've got a good chunk of his books. I don't have all of Matthew Corbett's books. I only have the first book in the series. I don't have A Boy's Life, Gone South, Blue World, and a few others. I don't have The Five or The Listener, which came out this year. The Listener did earlier this year. So I don't have all of his books, but I think I've got a fair amount of his books. And, I mean, for the books that I have of his, I mean, I'd say it's a fairly good collection so far. So let's just get it right on into it. The first one we got here is Ball. It's basically about an evil child, like the Antichrist child, basically. And that's his first novel. The second novel we got is Bethany's Sin. Yeah. I like his covers. They're pretty cool. We've got The Night Boat, which I got at a Books on Sale store. I don't know if I can focus on that. Don't have the physical copy of this one right now because I lent it to my dad, but we've got They Thirst, which is basically like Robert McCammon's vampire novel. It's like his Salem's Lot, like Stephen King has Salem's Lot, Robert McCammon has They Thirst. I actually read this recently and finished it. Pretty good vampire novel. If you like vampire novels, just good, straight-up, old-fashioned vampire novels, just straight-up horror, check out They Thirst by Robert McCammon. It was a pretty good little vampire novel. Next up, we've got Mystery Walk. Got Usher's Passing, which from what I've gathered is kind of a haunted house story. I'm not sure. And then this is one of his most famous novels, and I think he won the Bram Stoker Award for this one. That is a Swan Song by Robert McCammon, or obviously by Robert McCammon, but yeah, Swan Song was a pretty big one of his. It gets compared to The Stand by Stephen King. I've actually heard some people say that they actually prefer this over Stephen King's The Stand. So, and he got a note there from Dean Koontz. That's pretty cool. Alright, next up is Stinger. which was one of his books that got on the New York Times best-selling list. One of his bigger, more popular books. Next up, we've got Mine. Interesting little book. Got that on Books on Sale too. Which is basically, Books on Sale is basically like a, it's kind of like a half-price books a little bit. But yeah. And then we've got The Wolf's Hour. And I think, actually, I believe this came before Mine, but oh well. Pretty thick book there, but from what I've read, it's a pretty good book, pretty interesting book. It's about a werewolf. What is it? It's Nazis with his bear claws. So it's about an agent in war who is also a werewolf. So pretty interesting stuff. And we've got the first book in Speaks the Nightbird in the Matthew Corbett series, which is kind of like a historical fiction series from what I've gathered, kind of like a I don't know, like a historical fantasy / crime fiction, or I don't know if I'd say a crime fiction, but I don't know, sort of along those lines. This one in particular takes place during the Salem witch trials, I believe. So there's like 4, 5, or 6 books in this series, I think. And I don't know if you can actually get all of them on the physical copy, but. And this is the most recent McCammon novel that I have right now, The Border. Which, good luck trying to get this in the physical copy. I actually paid like, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I actually paid like $50 for this to get it off of Amazon. For some reason, you can get it on Kindle or places like that for a fair price, but if you want the physical copy, you're probably gonna have to pay an arm and a hand or arm and a leg for it. So, yeah, I don't know why exactly, but and I believe, aside from They Thirst, this is the only other Robert McCammon book that I have on hardcover. So, but yep. So that is all the Robert McCammon books I have right now. I'm definitely going to try to track the rest of his books down, and I'm sure it won't be that hard, because I mean, I think the rest of his books that I need to get aren't that hard to find. I'll probably have to get a few more offline, but really the earliest books that I showed you were really the most obscure ones and the hardest to get, so, I mean, as far as that goes, but, yeah, there they all are. Alright, so that concludes this video. I'm actually thinking about doing a Clive Barker book collection next, because I have a fair amount of his books as well. Not all of them, of course. I mean, most of these collections that you'll see on here are incomplete. Like, I don't have the complete works of, you know, any one author except for a few. But yeah, so you can maybe expect a Clive Barker book collection on here next. So yeah. Anyways, that's it for this one, and I'll catch you guys later. So peace and keep on reading.